Welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 13. This TUG works a little bit differently because we meet when the presenter is available and we focus on the presenter rather than the audience. Might sound a little bit unfair, but it's pretty cool because now we have people like Stacey here with us today presenting on a talk she also did at TC25. So the meetings are always recorded. They're available on YouTube. If you've got anything you want to present that's mildly Tableau related, please get in touch. My email is team.datafam@gmail.com and we can slot you in. Over the coming weeks in the future, we already have some awesome TC25 presentations and some presentations from Visit Sydney that was held this time last week. And I need to actually book in some more presentations for that as well. So all that will be, as I said, live if you've got time to meet up with us and on YouTube if you don't. Today, our presentation is from Stacey and the title of the presentation is Emergency Tableau Dashboard Needed Stat, talking about COVID in Maui, a whole heap of other things about education, I would guess. And she made the comment last night that she's going to be building some polygons live in Tableau. So live coding challenge is always good. So Stacey, I'll hand it over to you and you can do your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I will share my screen. And all right. So this was the presentation that I gave at TC25. And it's basically about how we at the Hawaii Department of Education use Tableau during some recent emergencies. And thanks, DataFam. Thanks so much, Chris, for the invite and for the opportunity. I love connecting with everybody. And so I'm just going to do a really quick introduction to who I am and a little bit of background about the Department of Education. And then I'll go into 3 specific dashboards that were created during emergencies. One, of course, related to COVID-19 and reporting requirements that were put forth by the state. And then I'll talk about kind of a military impact school analysis that we did with the spatial analysis. So that's where I'm actually going to go in and try to show you how I built the polygons for that. And then the Lahaina enrollment dashboard that was built during the fire that happened on Maui. So who am I? I am an institutional analyst in the data governance and analysis branch for the Hawaii State Department of Education. And I have been working here now for 9 years. I kind of can't believe that I've been in this one job that long. And I went to my first Tableau conference in 2018. I've tried to go in person every time since. In my free time, I don't really have the time to perform so much these days, but when I can, I'm involved in the theater here. So I'll assistant direct, and one night a week, I teach acting to children. And when I am not here or at Tableau conference, I'm usually road tripping around to national parks and seeing Brandi Carlile in concert. And then a little bit about the Hawaii State Department of Education. So we serve roughly 170,000 students, and we've got 30,000 staff working here if you include our part-time and casual employees. And we serve 295 schools, including our 258 Hawaii DOE public schools and 37 charter schools. And I'm not sure if anybody here has a background in education, but we are the only state that is a single local education agency and state education agency. And that's just basically how we report to the federal government. So a district that is on, the continent somewhere that sees these numbers is going to say, oh, 170,000 students for a district is kind of a lot. But we are just one single district, the whole state. It's a little easier than having us split up another way. And then this is a map of the main islands that make up our state. And our population is around 1.4 million, which is really similar to San Diego. But the interesting thing is that most of us reside specifically on the island of Oahu, and most of us on the island of Oahu are in Honolulu, which is kind of like right above the letter H. That's where I am now. That's where I live and work as well. And this is that same map with all of our schools plotted across the map. Our public schools are in that more teal color, and our charter schools are in that darker blue. Student population is on size. So you can kind of get an idea of the different sort of sizes, types of schools. You can tell that on Oahu, specifically the Honolulu area, all those overlapping dots. This is our more urban area. And then you can see that we also have some more rural and even some very remote schools. I don't know if any of you have ever visited the island of Maui and did that road to Hana. I did it once and I have no desire to do it again. It's a little precarious just to get out there, but this island, this dot right on the tip is Hana High and Elementary. So we've got across the islands a whole variety of different types of schools. Again, our 170,000 students that we serve, 80% of them identify as something other than white. So we are very diverse. 57% of our students are from a low socioeconomic background. And 11% of our students are active English learners. So not students that have been identified as potential or have exited the program, but 11% active English learners. 11% of our students are special education students, and with the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force all as presences on the island, 7% of our students are military connected. And so how do we use Tableau? So I wish personally that we were a Tableau district. We are not. We use something called Infinite Campus for our student information system. And then we also have a longitudinal educational information system that, it's got dashboards in it as well that teachers can go in. And that's something that's a little more locked down and security can be defined for different roles. And that is through PowerSchool. So then you might ask, how do we use Tableau? I'm a firm believer that Tableau is for everyone. And, there are just situations that you won't be able to use all the tools you have. And I feel like Tableau for us is the best tool to kind of fill in those gaps. And so one of those gaps is I kind of feel like I'm sort of a Band-Aid when there's some type of new compliance reporting or something comes out that needs to be done that is going to take a while to get into our longitudinal system to make sure that we're meeting our requirements. I'll go and I'll just build something in Tableau for the time being until they're able to, work with vendors, be able to make sure all the data gets into the system, and until they're able to get to that point where it can be internally in our system. Usually I end up creating something just really quick to get us up and running with something. Another thing are recurring cross-office dashboard projects. To me, these are usually really fun. They're often one-offs, things that the data may not be something that's in one of our systems. It might be just something that somebody hands us. So this right here was the legislature, for a report to the legislature about the way that we at the Department of Education utilize county facilities, basically going to the legislature saying, can you please continue to fund these because our schools and our students use all of these facilities that you have. So please continue to upkeep them. And then, of course, why you're here today, the emergency ad hoc reporting that we do. So of the 3 dashboards that I'm showing you today, this is the only one publicly available on our Tableau public site. It is no longer updated, but you can go in and you can see the past of what we did. And it was a requirement, actually, in July of 2021, the legislature made it mandatory that we publish a report weekly. And actually, we were updating it daily. But basically, of all the positive student and staff COVID-19 cases, and we had to make sure that we showed the school name, the date the case was reported to the school, and the date the individual was last on campus. And so When I found out that this project was happening and they wanted me to build a dashboard, I said, okay, great. Do you need help collecting data? And they said, oh, we've already started that. And it was a very, very, very messy Google Sheet where whoever had built it didn't require any of the data be in any particular format. I had dates that weren't dates. I had dates in all kinds of formats. I had COVID cases reported from the year 1921, and it was a lot just to kind of be able to clean that up. Eventually, our communications office started managing a cleaner Google Sheet, but the best thing happened when eventually we collaborated with the Department of Health to create a reporting system on SharePoint. So everybody could log in and I could rely that the daily report that we pulled would be in the same data format every single day. So that was a wonderful thing. And so when I built the dashboard, I said, okay, I'm going to start broad with the main overview. And then, I was like, oh, let's throw in a date filter, date range filter, have the school filters, daily counts, cumulative counts. And as I was presenting this to leadership, they asked, well, can we get a percentage of cases? So, we know how many students are at our schools, but I was like, oh, we need to make sure we have, if we're reporting staff counts too, to get an accurate percentage, we had to make sure we got all staff numbers. So we were able to eventually build this dashboard here. And so there are 3 tabs across the top: the statewide view, the school level view, and the list view. So this here is the statewide view. And, you can use that sort of date range filter to slide around. This is just showing this particular period in time and the total number of cases. And at the bottom, you can see it daily and by month as well. And then the school level view, this actually, I didn't select a particular school. If somebody went in and did the drop down, you could see all of this data for just one school, but I left it with all schools. And of course, there's a caveat that the data is only as accurate as the reporting is. And then finally, the most boring view, which is the list view. But we wanted to make sure we had this to cover our bases with the legislature. So that was like kind of our first venture into an emergency dashboard situation. Hopefully everybody is familiar with Tableau. I heavily relied on it through this process. Anybody who's not familiar with it, you can do all your cleaning in here. These are joins over here. This is a union. I've got filters, all kinds of stuff to clean the data. And then, of course, you just run it at the end. And the great thing for me was that every day I just take that new file, I'd upload the new file right here, and then I just push run at the end. No need to do any cleaning at all. I set up that cleaning process once, and then I was able to rely on that every single day. So that was a huge help for this one. The next big emergency dashboard, luckily, it never came to be an emergency, but it was a really good practice for us. And I learned a lot in this one doing spatial analysis. We were posed with the question, if military bases were to shut down, what would be the impact to the Hawaii Department of Education? And I have since learned that a lot of states don't, on their military bases, don't necessarily have public schools on base. There are a lot of bases where the schools are run by the Department of Defense. Here in Hawaii, all of our military bases have schools on them, and all of the schools are run by us. They are all Hawaii Department of Education schools. No Department of Defense schools, no private schools, no charter schools. They are all our public schools. And so we had to think about, okay, if there were to be a base shutdown, and this was actually built, this was when COVID was at its peak. So this was before we were returning to work, before there was a vaccine, everybody was home. So we were wondering, okay, if the military bases were to shut down, who of our students that live on a military base but go to school off base might be stuck on base, or who lives off base but goes to school or teaches at a school that is on a military base. And we actually, just looking at addresses, I'm sure the post office would know, and I'm sure there would be a way to find out, but just looking at addresses, we didn't have a way of knowing which of our students actually lived on a military base. So that was something fun that we kind of got to figure out in this process. So this report, this dashboard is not publicly available. We built a bunch of dashboards for our student data as well as for our staff data. So in this actual dashboard, you could click on any of these military bases here. Whatever schools were on the base would pop up over here, and the dashboard would filter for that data. But what I have here is just showing you the broad overview of all of the schools that are on military bases. We've got 8 of them. And then we have 2 schools that are directly adjacent to one of the military bases, like right across the street. So we included that in this as well. But this is just kind of a broad overview for leadership to see these are the schools that are on military bases. And then so we took the next step to look at our enrollment capacity. So here, the Fort Shafter military base was selected, and there is only one school on that military base, Shafter Elementary School. And we can see that they're a little over capacity here. But we were wondering, okay, even without knowing how many of those students live on that military base, let's just say all the students in theory lived off base, would we be able to place them at another nearby elementary school? So down here are the nearby elementary schools, and we can see that Salt Lake Elementary School is over capacity. But if we look at some of the other schools nearby, there is room. Again, we don't know the exact grades, if it's we'd be able to put them there, but at least knowing we have physical space on other campuses should there be an event where those students needed another school to go to. And then this one was, in the event of a base closure or lockdown, which students would end up stuck on or off a military base. So here, Wheeler Schofield Army Airfield is selected. And so for most of the students, this is not an issue. However, we can see that about 3% live off base but attend school on base, and 3% live on base and attend school off base. So one would think, well, that's a really similar number. Can we just swap those student populations? But then this bar chart down here shows that the students that would be stuck off a base predominantly attend elementary schools and a middle school, while the students that would end up stuck on a military base attend a high school. So we wouldn't be able to do a 1-for-1 swap in that situation. So just having the data presented here in this way kind of helped leadership to be able to think through these types of questions. And then this one is about where our employees live and work. And again, for the most part, this would be a non-issue for our staff. We did have 17% that lived off base, but work on a base. And this is specifically, again, for that same Wheeler Schofield Army Airfield. And 2% live on base and work off a base. But what I want to draw your attention to specifically is this map here. This is actually what drove all of the analysis in these dashboards. So initially, all those yellow dots, those are addresses, those are where our staff live. And so we were able to do that. But at the time, we did not have these polygons. We did not know who was on or off a base. And so I remember just thinking, I wonder if there's a way to do this in Google Maps. Is there a way to do this? And so I played around with it a while, and you can't do it in Google Maps, but you can do it in Google My Maps. You are actually able to create your own spatial files. And I feel like at conference, this was the biggest takeaway that most people had. So I want to actually do a demo here, which I did not do at conference. I showed a bunch of graphics, but I want to be able to actually show you. So you do need to have a Google account to do My Maps. But once you create an account, you'll be able to go to My Maps and you can create your own map. So you can see this was the military base map that I had created, but I'm going to create a new map here. And I know that the data that I've kind of created just to play with today is something I messed around with. And I'm just going to use the site of Tableau Conference. And so what you can do, and I know this because I've been there and I've seen it, so I know kind of where the cutoffs are of it. But if you don't know, you can use the Google Maps to actually view the exact location and see what it looks like. Or maybe if it's near you, you can go there in person and see exactly where the cutoffs are. But you use this tool right here to draw a line. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to select add a line or a shape. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just doing this as a demo, so I'm not too worried about accuracy. But this is roughly where the convention center is. So I'm just going to roughly do that. And so this is the polygon, and I'm going to name this SD Convention Center and save that. And just for fun, I'm going to do one for the hotel I stayed at as well. This whole block isn't the hotel, but just to create another polygon, I'm going to do that. Hard Rock Hotel. And so these polygons have saved here with the name. I'm going to name the map TC 2025. And I'm just going to name the layer as well. Okay. And what you're going to do is click these three dots right here to bring up this menu. And you can export it as a shape file that tab can read. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to export it as a KML and download that. So I'm going to open that and I'm going to just drag it to my desktop. Okay. So I have that, and I also created, this is all fake data, but I just wanted to show you. These would be kind of representing like our students or theoretical people that could be at Tableau Conference. I have their names here and then the latitude and longitude points here. So now we're going to put this all into Tableau. So I'm going to pull up that Excel file first with the locations. And I'm going to also add our spatial file here. So this is the one we created using Google My Maps. And so now we have that in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the data. So I'm bringing that in here. And so with spatial data, you need to make sure that the latitude and longitudes, you need to do a make point. So I'm going to create a join calculation just so that everything is spatial data and that Tableau sees it all as spatial data, and that we'll be able to do that. So I'm going to do a make point with our latitude and longitude, and that's it. And then, so if you look here, it doesn't have the intersect available to you yet. But once you go here and you select geometry from your polygon file, now you have the ability to see where they intersect. So I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to do full outer. I'm going to go to this worksheet. And so the lat long is the file of just the points of the people. And then the TC 2025 is our polygon file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring the polygons in first. And so here's that convention center, and here's the hotel. And then I'm going to throw on our people onto another map layer. And so it's just one dot now because I have to go in and I have to undo the aggregation. So that's everybody. Some of them are hidden here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take name. So name, this name field here is created, and this is the magical field. This is the field that Tableau does the work, and this is how we found out who was on and off bases. This is the magical one right here. I'm going to put it on color. And so now we can see who is located in the conference area, who is outside of it, and who's at the hotel. I'm going to go ahead and just, why not throw their names on a label? Let's see, just to see everyone and where they are. Okay. And then the great thing about this is, let's say all you need to know from this is, I just want to know who is where, right? Because for us, that was one of the biggest challenges with that military dashboard, just who even lives on a military base and who doesn't, right? So all we'd have to do would be just to take, the names and just this magical field name and put that there. And this tells us, okay, when it's null, that means that they are not within any of the polygons. And then it also tells you where the polygons are. So we can see that Jack Hodgins is at the Hard Rock Hotel, and we can see who's at the convention center. So just to get that information was huge for us. And so, just as a means to know where people are, in theory, I could just go and download this if there's no need to visualize the data, right? Just to get this information is incredibly, incredibly useful. But of course, we want to play with the data, so we can always, put our magical field there and throw an account, make a quick little bar graph, put that on color and label it, and let's see, put the null at the bottom. And so, just to be able to really quickly throw something together, we can also, we can also turn it into a pie, right? Just for fun. And can put the percentages, quick table calculation, see the percentages, put that on the label as well, so we know who is where. And, if you wanted to build a dashboard and throw that all together, you could just really quickly throw something fun together. And if I use the bar to kind of drive the graph, then we could go in and see who is at the convention center. And then so we have the dots on the map. Obviously, having their names is a little redundant when we have this list here, but just really quickly, just to be able to know where everybody is, this has been such a useful tool. And it's, I love maps. And so it's fun to know that I can go ahead and create my own. So this was just kind of a fun process for us to be able to build and create that. And so that's it for the military dashboard. I'm really quickly also going to talk a little about our Lahaina enrollment dashboard, which was to track our students after the wildfires on Maui. So this was a pretty crazy thing that happened, because I do remember going to bed on August 8th. And I remember hearing that there was a wildfire on Maui before I went to bed. And I didn't think anything of it, because I live in Hawaii and we have wildfires all the time. There's just never been a precedent of it, spreading and burning down a town or anything like that. Usually they're just kind of brush fires sort of out in the middle of, somewhere far away. And usually they're able to be contained. Granted, there was a lot of wind this day, so that's why it was harder to contain. But basically, I went to bed not knowing what happened. And everybody that works in my office, we're all early risers. So the next day we came to work And word still hadn't traveled about how bad the situation was yet. So we got to work, and somebody from the Office of Facilities walked into our office and said, "Hey, can we get the enrollment data for the Lahaina area on Maui, which has 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school?" And so we were like, "Sure. What do you need it before? What do you need this data for?" And he said, "A school has burned to the ground overnight." And I actually thought I misheard him, even though I knew there was a fire. Just the fact that it wasn't on the news and I hadn't heard anything, I didn't realize how bad it was. And so I waited till he left and I double checked with my boss. I was like, "Did he say what I think he said, that a school burned down?" He's like, "Yeah." And, they sent pictures, and sure enough, we were down a school and a whole town basically burned down. So this situation allowed us to be proactive. Obviously, when something terrible like this happens, you really want to be able to help in any way you can. But as data people, we're not the ones that are on the front lines. So this was a good one, unlike with a lot of the COVID stuff, which kind of felt like jumping and running and trying to figure everything out. We said, okay, we've handled some emergency situations before, let's get to it. So what we did was we created a data file from the day before the fire, and we used this as our base file. There were 3,001 students that attended these 4 schools. And this was just kind of the base file, the base numbers that we used for everything to be able to track where these students went. And we built a dashboard to track that enrollment on a daily basis. And we ended up reporting this to the Board of Education for a year and a half following the fire. So again, this one is not publicly available. It is this bright pink color. Each of our islands has a color and a flower associated with it. The island of Maui is Lokelani pink, and their flower is the Lokelani rose, which is this color. And so we picked this color to kind of, tie it to a sense of place. A lot of stuff has since come out for Maui in this color, to have that sort of community element to it. Across the top of the dashboard, so this is the enrollment dashboard right here, and these are the buttons to take you to the different areas, the different dashboards across the top here. And so this is that sort of first glance here. The original dashboard doesn't have the data suppressed, and there's a little more data on it that I pulled off. But basically, you can see this data is as of December 8th, 2023. And the current enrollment on this date was 1,970. And so again, that's a lot less than that original 3,001 students. And then at the bottom, I can tell you here, this 26.6% homeless, that is way higher than their normal homeless rate. So this next enrollment at a glance view is that same data, basically more or less broken down by school. We can kind of see how many students are at which grade level that would be affected by this. Kamehameha, the third elementary school, was the school that burned down. And actually what we ended up doing was at Nahi and Ena Elementary School, they had physical land, they had space for us to be able to build temporary classrooms. So even though it's all physically located at this one area, we still do have them as separate schools right now. Of course, enrollment has gone way down overall. And so you can kind of see that in this enrollment movement Sankey. So on the left are all of those 4 schools and the number of students that we started with. And then on the right, you can see where they went to. So you can see that these students all stayed at the schools they were at originally. These lighter pink colors indicate that they stayed on the island of Maui and are going to a school on Maui, but just not any of those schools. So maybe after their home burned down, they moved in with another family member that lived elsewhere. So they're attending a different school on island. And then at the bottom, the green bar indicates that they moved to the island of Kauai. The red bar indicates they moved to the Big Island. I didn't do a great job at differentiating the yellow, but there's actually two shades of yellow there. One of them shows that they moved to the island of Oahu, and this kind of larger band here. The school is on Oahu, but this is our Hawaii Technology Academy is a charter school that is basically online learning. So it makes sense that we would have a lot of students that decided to move to online learning. And then at the gray at the bottom, 197 students enrolled in private school, 115 students moved to another state. And that middle shade of gray, that sliver in there, are students that their families decided to pull them out for homeschool. So this just gives us an overall view of who goes where. It can be filtered, by one of those schools on the left, or, if there's a school on the right that knows they're going to be receiving students from one of the impacted schools, then they'll be able to see where they're coming from and who they are. We do have this also available in a list view that has their names and their information, but obviously I won't be sharing that today. But, and I'm not going to go over all of this in detail or anything, but basically, it really helped us to be accountable to the Board of Education and to track for ourselves, to know where our students were. But also it really helped, because we had the data available and we were on top of it with the tracking, we were able to give this data to FEMA, to various nonprofits that were trying to help out. Our homeless liaisons were the first people with boots on the ground out there. And then also to be able to get grants from NGOs and just kind of help out the area in general, make sure that we could get learning hubs up and going, have Wi-Fi going out there. So yeah, it was great that, even though we're just data people, that we felt that we were able to help out in this situation. And so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to answer.
So there was one question. Jacob,
yes.
Way back on your Tableau prep slide, he said, how do you balance whether you clean in something like prep versus fixing input issues at the source?
That's a tough one. Well, sometimes I don't have control of the source, right? So I just get what I get. Like, there are, depending upon what the dashboard is and what's going on, sometimes it's something we can pull from our student information system. And if that's the case, I can just talk to our tech guys who pull the data, and I can confer with them and say, oh, no, can you do it this way? In which case I have a little bit more control over the way I'm getting the data. But there are some programs that we have that we want to report on where I literally get like a PDF that's handwritten student names and IDs, so it completely varies. And so when I don't have control over the situation, that's a tough one. I also just love prep though. So since I do a lot of stuff in Tableau Public specifically, it's great because I like to be able to do all of my aggregation and suppression in prep, just so that I know when I feed it into Tableau and I know the report's going to go public, that even if, I usually turn off the download possibility just because student data and everything, but just so that I know that even if something were to happen and somebody were able to get their hands on that data, I know it's already aggregated and suppressed and I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, definitely. You've always got to watch that data privacy. You're trying to make something public to show what the data does, but at the same time protect the data so that no one can get to it at all.
Yeah.
That was good. That was cool. I loved your map. It was very simple to get the maps up and going by using Google My Maps. So
it's just knowing that that's even a possibility that we didn't know at the time. And it's so fun to play with. And, I didn't mention it. I'm sure everybody here is aware of it, but now that you can go in and it creates sort of that, it tells you where the overlap is between the dots and the polygons, you can use that data field to drive more analysis, right? So that's what we ended up doing, just to, using that field and just creating all kinds of calculations to be able to figure more things out. Yeah.
And I think is it spatial parameters I think they're just coming out in the next release or something. So that can actually enhance that as well.
Oh, that's great. I don't know about that. I need to keep an eye on that because I love playing with maps. So
yeah, No, I love when you brought in Excel and the spatial file. And it's just like, how are you going to join those? You know, okay, a full outer on a make. It's just like, that's cool. Because then you get the null area as well when they're not in a polygon, they're somewhere else. So
yeah.
It was awesome. There is another question as well. I just almost missed that. So is it Melina said, what are your most used and critical dashboards at the DOE beyond these emergency dashboards?
You know, I'm not entirely sure because I'm not on the team that does our internal, like our longitudinal dashboards that are in the system. So I don't know the ones that are the most popular. I would guess things like attendance and chronic absenteeism are really big. So I wouldn't be surprised if those are some of the most used ones, from something that people all the way at the state level, legislature, everybody cares about, down to the school level, right? So that's a big one. But there's always, like, testing, our testing data especially for English and math. There's all kinds of those typical sort of student data points. Third grade literacy is a big one, as well as things relating to completing high school and going to college as well. Yeah.
Awesome. No more questions. That's okay. But we can ask questions at the end. I'll unmute everyone and we can talk if you've got some time left. Sorry, and here's all Stacey's contact details. So Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Tableau Public, it's all there. And again, this is in the recording as well if you need it later on. So the next section is Fast Five. So quick questions, quick answers. Stacey hasn't seen these questions before. It's meant to be a little bit lighthearted, or very lighthearted. And as I said, there's no right answers or wrong answers. It's just your personal feelings about what the question is. So the first question is, do you sketch your dashboard first or go straight into?
If it's something really basic, I'll do it in Tableau. But if I am building out an involved dashboard, I actually love to draw it out first. Yeah. I'll draw it by hand. Yeah.
And that's on paper or something else?
On paper. Yep.
I
like to save them too. So I like, I'm like the only person in my office that still takes notes with a pen. Everybody else takes notes on their computer. I'll still take notes with a pen. I still sketch with, a pen or a pencil. So yeah, I like to save all my little drawings and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Question number 2, what part of Tableau do you wish you would have learned earlier in your journey?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, obviously, I wish I knew that I could have done a lot of things. Like, I didn't even know make point. We had to figure that out. Like, but I feel like I'd been playing with spatial stuff for a while. I mean, I guess getting proficient with LODs took me a minute. So I'll say that. I'll say that because that took me a little bit to get proficient in. Yeah.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah.
And if Tableau were a person, how would you describe its personality to a friend?
Oh man, I love Tableau. I would say, fun.
Yep.
I don't know. I can't think of anything other than just fun and lets you be creative. Yeah.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah.
And the next question is, do you prefer dashboards with lots of color or a clean, simple look?
I feel like I'm a simple person because we work with a lot of student data and school stuff. We do have a lot of dashboards if you go to our Tableau Public that have like pictures of students and like bright colors and whatever. And so that's not my natural inclination. I'll do something more like the Maui dashboard where there's a highlight color, and something like that. I'm a little more basic, but a lot of our dashboards do use the color just because education. Yeah.
And I like the pink on your dashboard. When you first brought that up, I went, it's a bit too bright, but it's that color for a reason because it's that association straight away. So it makes it really easy. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the last question is, what's more fun, building charts or designing the dashboard layout?
I'd say building the charts. So in all the dashboards you saw, I want to say I did both for those, but in a lot of what you'll see in Tableau Public, where you see things that might be made in like Canva and have a lot more visual aspects to it, I actually didn't do the layout. I have a colleague who has more of a background in like graphic design, and so she and I work together. I'm like the numbers person. I build them. I do all the data. I make sure the data gets in the right format. I build them, and then we talk to each other, and I say, okay, like I kind of think this should be the highlight. I want this to be on the left side. I kind of just tell her how I want it, and she will go and she'll like create the shell. She'll make sure the spacing is exactly right and do all the tedious things that I'm capable of doing, but I'd rather not. So yeah, I'm a builder for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the same thing, if the data doesn't function, it can be a really nice dashboard. If the data doesn't function properly,
yeah,
dashboard's a little bit pointless. But but you need both, so that's always cool. Awesome. Okay, thanks for that. But again, it's great to see, and I've used spatial files before, but not KML. But it was nice to see the full outer and a few things like that as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
Our next session is on June the 13th till the 12th, depending on where you live, all the same time. Aria Varon talking about AI and how AI works with business intelligence tools, basically opening the black box. It's going to be interesting because I think she explains how Tableau uses AI to actually build things better in things like Tableau Pulse. But again, those times depends on where you are in the world. So again, if you're in the US, sort of a good time. If you're in Europe, it sort of may not be good at 1 a.m. in the morning, but that's just life. And all the recordings for this tug and all the other tugs are on YouTube at Team DataFam, or if you're out and about and you can't watch YouTube, there's a Spotify podcast and an Apple podcast as well. If you've got anything to present, just email me at team.datafam@gmail.com and we can fit you in. And again, thank you, Stacey, for the awesome presentation. It was really good to see, and this recording will be available soon.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. And then I see Andy posted about the spatial parameters and put links. Thank you so much.
Yep, I'm just reading that last link. It says coming soon. So yes, not there yet, but it will be soon. So if you've got time, I'm going to just unmute everybody. I'll start at the bottom today. So as soon as I make you a presenter and a moderator, feel free to unmute yourself at your end, and then you can talk. It's just, I've got a million little buttons to click on to make people presenters and moderators. And I'm joking at this point because I don't know where people are in the world, but no one sort of unmutes themselves. No one turns on their camera, but it's okay. It's fine.
I will totally unmute myself and turn on my camera this time.
Thanks, Anne.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Stacey. I have a question for you. Actually, on that, on your Lahaina dashboard, were there any opportunities, or do you know, was there any cleanup that you needed to do to account for any students that were missing from beginning count to end count? Does that make sense?
So the way I think it worked was, I think they were just going from where they were, and then as we got the information, we kind of shifted them over to where they ended up at. So from that perspective, then it wouldn't be accurate until you knew where everybody was. But there were people that did know. So I know that it took a long time for them to chase everybody down and get in touch with everybody. Because obviously when something like this happens, and if you just up and you leave the state, it's not your priority to go back and tell the school like, oh, we left, but we did have students for a long time that were unaccounted for. And so there were people that were tracking that. Yeah.
Okay. So you eventually got to a 1-to-1 on everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's so easy where somebody could just get lost in the shuffle and something else is going on top of
Absolutely.
fire. So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone's sitting there waiting for the next person now. That's cool. If there's no more questions,
I got a question.
go for it.
Thanks so much for presenting. I actually have a question specific to Hawaii. What are some things that you like to do outside of when you're building dashboards?
I would love to tell you go to the beach, but I'm actually somebody that like avoids the sun. Yeah, I mostly I am into I'm a fan of the arts, and so I go and I have like season tickets to all the theaters, and I go and I see all the shows that happen here, and anything going on, the symphony, you know, I'm an art person, and I go to
My mic's on.
but
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
but it is nice. I mean, I complain about the sun a lot, but at the same time, I don't know how well I'd do if it was dark all the time. I mean, I know that I was fine when I was in college on the East Coast because I was so busy being a college student that I had no clue what time of day it even was, right? But once I graduated and I was in the working world and I was living in Providence, Rhode Island, it was rough some parts of the year when you leave home and it's dark out, and then you sit in an office all day, and I didn't have a window, and then I left and it was dark out. So yeah, that was weird. So in that sense, I feel very, very lucky that when I leave work, usually the sun is still out. Yeah, or there's still light. Yeah.
I'm curious because I've always heard that saying, "Priced out of paradise." Like, the economy over there is kind of tough, and I just wonder like, how that's been a big impact lately.
The average person probably needs a couple jobs to survive. Like, you can't live on a typical salary here. Like, you just can't. You need a couple jobs, or you need a job that pays pretty well. So I'm very lucky that I can survive here, but you know, that dollar would stretch a lot farther if I lived somewhere on the continent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky we get to hear about your journey and your journey. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Is anybody on here in the field of education, or what sects do you work in?
I'm in banking.
Banking.
I'm currently in automotive.
Oh, cool.
I've touched on education before. So there's in Australia, there's a thing called, and now I can't even think it's a registered training organisation, and my camera's died for some reason. But RTO is sort of a more of an adult education for people wanting to change vocation and stuff like that. So I've done reporting on that side. But yeah, I think a lot of the state departments here probably use some other product, not Tableau. But yeah, it's like the reporting is interesting.
Yeah.
It's always that balance. Go, Andy.
Oh, sorry, Chris. I was going to say, in a previous life when I worked for a consultancy, I did a little bit in childcare. We had some clients who were in the childcare business, so that's, I think, as close as I got to education. But.
And it's the same thing with that sort of data. It can be very sensitive. So there's some public-facing dashboards I've done for a state department talking about, you know, it sort of borders on that, on the quality of the care of the child. So homelessness, risk of other things happening without going into it too much. And obviously they're number one, highly sensitive figures that need to be publicly available. Number two, very sensitive data that you need to see the aggregate, but not the unit record. So when you sort of got on that, I'm going, yep, I've been through that before. Where it's just like, you need the unit records to make up the aggregate, but you are not allowed to let that unit record information out. You know, you just want the count in the area and that's it. No latitude, longitude, and not spatially precise measurements, but very spatially generic measurements. So on this island there is 10 students, but it wouldn't be, and in this location there's 10 students, because that's getting too specific. But it's good. The same thing. You need to report on it, but you need to report on it properly at the right level so that it works. I like the sand key to sort of see where people go and things like that.
Yeah. Even though it's more on a practical level, it's more practical to have a list of names and all the information. It's nice to just see, just from a higher perspective, like a higher level, just to see where everybody is. Yeah.
Just see the movement.
Yeah.
You touch a specific kind of impact. You mentioned, like, because I know when I'm working at where I work, I'm looking at numbers, and those are just events, activities, right? But now when you guys are talking about what you've done, you're actually talking about specific people and what impacts them, and what the stuff that you're looking at and aggregating or with displaying or creating on dashboards. Those are actually people whose lives have been impacted in some form or another. So that's good that you brought that up.
Yeah, I feel like I've had directors, luckily, for the most part, that, everybody complains kind of about administration and how we're up in our ivory towers or whatever. But I've been lucky enough to work for people that always tie our work somehow back to the students, and that's why we're all in education. That's why I'm here, even though I was never a teacher or anything. Like And I could do what I do in any other sector, right? Essentially, but I do love education, and I foresee myself like staying within education as well. So, it's nice knowing that it makes you feel warm and fuzzy a little, even though it's hard because the data isn't always all that great. In fact, a lot of the times it's not. And a lot of times people would rather see things that I cannot show, or say something like, oh, can you make the data show this? And I was like, yeah, if the data showed that, absolutely I could, but it doesn't, So there's a lot of challenges with that. I feel like, it's one of those situations where you work really hard to make something really nice, and then everybody freaks out or, whatever. And it's not because they don't like the work you've done. It's because of what the data shows, right? So that's always difficult.
Yeah, especially when they feel that the numbers should show one thing, but actually the real numbers show something else. It's just like, you're trying to report reality in the best way possible, not to just twist it to what it might just be a gut feeling for what it should be, but they're wrong as well.
And in education, a lot of times if an initiative happens, you may not see results from it immediately. It might take years for something, and generations of students to like have gone through something that's changed curriculum wise or whatever, right? That's always a challenge.
Yep, definitely.
I'd completely forgotten that in a previous role, I built we had a service, part of the org I was at, where people would go out and re-engage students who had extended absenteeism, things like that, and bring them back in. And as part of that, there was a big reporting process that someone owned, and it was taking them like 4 days to generate these reports every month. And so we came in and automated most of that and got it down to well under a day, which was great. And then obviously that frees up their time to actually focus on the service and everything like that. So
was that for like college or like
primary? It was, I think it was like what we call high school here. Okay. It was in New Zealand specifically.
Okay. Oh, neat. That's great. I know that I was at the University of Hawaii before I moved over to the Department of Education, and I was there when things were, this was over 10 years ago at this point, but they were finally able to start really, really using the data more. And they did go in and they were able to look through histories of students that had previously attended and would actually be able to get a degree with just a few more classes. So they kind of went through and were able to sift through all the students they had who were just missing a few classes and reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to come back, get that degree? Yeah.
Yeah, I use that as a machine learning example because there was a university in Sydney that did this a few years ago, and they said, we want to stop people dropping out of uni. Obviously, it's financially viable, it's financially good for the university, but also for the student to try and catch before they've completely flunked out, but they're heading down that wrong way, and see if you can catch them and actually keep them at university, turn their path around so they can actually be successful and get a degree. And that was, I don't know, way before COVID. But it was just like, can we do this? And like machine learning was just starting. We went, okay. Well, and we used Alteryx to say the same thing. If we've got students that have failed, students that have not failed yet, what's the difference between the two? How can we actually turn them around to keep them at uni to do the same thing? But ultimately, they get a degree, they pass, they graduate. Their life is better, hopefully, by having the degree and going on doing things rather than actually having a debt to pay for the university to flunk out and actually have no result, just a larger financial debt. So it's always good stuff like that. Okay, if there's no one else, then that's the end. Thank you for your time again, Stacey, and this recording will be up online soon.
Thanks. Nice meeting everybody.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Have a good
Thanks,
day.
Stacey.
Bye.
Thanks, Stacey. Take care, everybody.